All right, man. This is episode number 64 of the Cozy Corner of Cinema. This is being recorded on Monday, June 19th, 2023 at 1:03 p.m. Hope you all have been having a very, very good and productive week. A lot of us have long weekends here or days off lately, and I hope you have been using that wisely, spending the time that you have doing exactly what you want to do. This weekend has been very productive, I have to say. Reading has been accomplished, writing has been accomplished, and plenty of watching has been accomplished. We want to keep up that momentum because when we keep it going, man, it's like, second nature, like driving a car or, like riding a bike. It's like, oh, got to do this, got to do that, because with the time that we're given, man, we want to make sure we're doing exactly what it is that we want to do with it. If we're not, sitting around and hanging out with people we don't want to hang out with, or doing something we don't want to do, or doing this or that, it's your life, man. You got to take command of it. But with the next couple of weeks, prepping for the top 10 of 1934 episode that'll be coming out at the beginning of July. So for the next episode or so, this one and the next two after this actually will be less of recent talk of films that I've watched lately, more so of just what I was looking at is kind of like playing catch up with a lot of films that I wanted to recommend previously that I hadn't got around to, or just other kind of talk, of any kind of literature or art or anything like that. I'm finally in the second half of this Norman Mailer book that has been completely taking up my time the past month or so. It's a very long book with small text, but it has been completely engrossing. The other night I had read the part in the book where he had gotten onto he had been on a discussion panel with on the Dick Cavett show with Gore Vidal, another provocative and famous author, and another woman who I believe was something of a moderator ish, something. I think she was Gore Vidal's friend. But either way, it was a very interesting talk between the two of them at that point in the book. Gore Vidal had written some very unkind words about Norman Mailer in the press, and Norman Mailer, already being a bit of an eccentric character himself, had a very interesting discussion and conversation on that show. I mean, you will never find that kind of interesting conversation on contemporary kind of talk shows, man. You look all that up, and it's just celebrities, posting, talking about just completely a nonsensical conversation. It's almost like non-versation, man. It's like there's nothing to get out of it. It's just completely shallow conversation, completely shallow responses. You are not going to see anyone like a Norman Mailer or a Gore Vidal on a late night show now. You will see just some Hollywood or some pop star talking about the most pointless of conversation. It is a completely different era, and that is not to say a romanticizing of one era, but listening to this discussion, it was so fascinating hearing these two go back and forth, and these two eccentric personalities ultimately clashing. And then you look now, and it's just nothing of the sort. It is just nothing worthwhile, man. Completely devoid of any sort of intellectual property. It is completely pointless. With that said, I want to talk about a couple of films if I can get the opportunity to. If I have the time to, I should say, more so, because the 1934 watches are going very well. Been seeing some really terrific films, some other films that are not so good, but are getting watched nonetheless. It's very interesting to see a lot of famous actors and actresses of this time in earlier works. You have great actors like John Wayne, Joan Crawford, Betty Davis, Fred Astaire, all these just great actors, and seeing earlier works of theirs, it just is a true great start to their career, earlier so, I should say. But, so one of the films that I wanted to talk about a little bit recently that I just didn't get an opportunity to for the sake of time is the film Variety, man. This film is from let me get the year up, actually. 1983. So this is about the time this is directed by Betty Gordon. It's about this main girl. What the hell is the actor's name? I want to pull it up here. What I got right here. Sandra McLeod, I believe is her name. She plays this girl, Christine. And, she is in the heart of Times Square in the early 1980s. So the last kind of bastion of this era, going into the mid 80s when we had the AIDS, epidemic and stuff. And that's a little conversation right there. But going from the 70s into the 80s, you're still at a lot of, that whole era of Times Square, of the dirty theaters, of the peep shows, of the erotic bookstores, man, just completely different than what it is now. The total Disneyfication of just corporate landscape, man. But anyways, so she needs a job, so she ends up working at this adult movie theater in the ticket booth, in the ticket taker. And you're watching this film, and it's very low key. It's very light on plot, heavier on character. But the closest that it is to something contemporary is you have actor Luis Guzman, who you've seen in probably many contemporary comedies. He's one of these guys where you look him up and you just know that you've seen him before. He's been in so much work, but I believe this was maybe his first film or one of his first films. He plays something of one of the coworkers, kind of like a janitor in a way. Helps clean up the theater. But I love this whole era of any kind of film or any kind of whatever it is, documentary, any kind of photography of New York in this era. I love seeing the marquees, the billboards, the posters for the erotic films, man. I love seeing the interiors of these cinemas, man. And the Variety Theater was a real cinema, man. I don't know if it showed primarily adult films. I believe it did. But, what I love is how the way the film is shot. Betty Gordon, we go inside the cinema. We actually see the interiors of it. I was talking about that film a couple months ago, Sam Mendes' new film, Empire of Light, that came out at the end of 2022, which I've talked about a couple times that I really like a lot, but one of my favorite sequences of the year was right at the beginning when they're opening up the theater and you see these great, posters for these United Kingdom posters, that are way more horizontal than they are vertical, and just opening up the concession stand and getting the projector ready. It's just a beautiful portrait of just a great cinema right there, man. And this is the same, man, because this is less about the cinema and more about kind of this character who's feeling kind of lost in life. And there's an interesting dynamic where, she makes small talk with her coworkers. She kind of does her own thing. She doesn't really have a clear path. And what it does, interestingly enough, is that as it goes on, it's way more, which I should also say, by the way, is that if you're interested at all in this time period, this is almost kind of mandatory viewing, because you're going to see so many interesting marquees and cinemas and advertisements for, adult films, man, stuff like I Like to Watch and other films like that. But about halfway through or so, this becomes less about the not that it ever really was about the cinema, but halfway through it really kind of strays away from that, where the cinema is featured less and less, and more about this character, where we have this other character whose name, I apologize, I do not remember who the actor is, but this guy who's coming around the cinema, and he's trying to kind of hit on her, be kind of like a creep or anything like that. In any other film, it would be this singular kind of character, this singular kind of black and white morality there. But then it's interesting where that character is kind of taken, man, how their relationship kind of envelops the way the film goes on, and the film definitely takes a direction that you don't necessarily think it would, man. And is it because of the negligence of the main protagonist, or is it because of a screenwriting kind of trope to move the story along? And that's completely up for you to decide, but the way that it does it, man, is so cool. The way that they do with this character, there's long sequences without dialogue. Sandra McLeod, who's an actor that I'm really not familiar with, I don't think she's done a lot before or after this. Let me look on our IMDb here, actually. So it looks like she actually did less of acting work and did more of script supervising. She actually went on to work on quite a couple of John Sayles films, City of Hope and Limbo. And City of Hope is one I haven't talked about on the show, but I'm a big fan of that film. And she also was a script supervisor on another Times Square film from 1980 called Times Square. This recently got a release from Kino, which I watched recently. This has most notably a small role from Tim Curry, but this also has, it also has a great, kind of portrait of Times Square in this era, man. I think it's a good film. It's a little bit shallow, but overall, I think it is a fun film, and I just love films from this period that can really show off kind of the society that was around it. And, obviously I recommend 42nd Street Pete's YouTube channel. I don't watch as much of his stuff anymore. I find myself kind of disagreeing with a lot more of his opinions than he brings up. But I think he's a very fascinating guy. In his book that he wrote a couple of years ago, talking about kind of his experiences on 42nd Street and Times Square, and the cinemas he would go to, and the people he interacted, is all very interesting. And I don't know if that book is out of print or not. It's a very short book. You can read it in a day easily, but if you're committed to it, but very interesting nonetheless. That actually led me to go on and research some about the Variety Theater, and also want to give a little nod to the website cinematreasures.org. It's just it's become just my favorite website. Just tons and tons and tons of images and pictures from cinemas all around the world, open and closed. People just contributing their own photos, their own kind of advertisements for the cinema. It's just I found myself at one day recently is just on the site for hours, man. It was, for a long period of time, maybe not hours, but you just, and you look at the Variety Theater on there, which has now been closed down, which, as most of those New York cinemas, those Times Square cinemas have, the Rialto and the Arrow. I mean, they're all gone, man, or they've been replaced. There was somebody, I think it was, I don't know what website it was. It was an adult website that was actually putting points onto where all these cinemas were, and all these bathhouses were, and where they are now. You can give that a Google. I don't remember what the name of the website was. I remember trying to look it up on my computer, and my computer was acting very slow with it. But it's just a different era, man. Which is fine. I mean, it's one thing to talk about kind of, rose-tinted glasses of a certain era where, yeah, man, I'm not going to act like I was, I was too young for any of that. I'm not going to act like I was like, oh, it was a great era and all that. But I do think that a bit of character is lost. I've been to Times Square once or twice, and it's just completely nauseating. Just these bright lights, these loud advertisements, just flickering everywhere, man. It's truly just, there's no character to it. It's one of these cities that just, this area, not even the city, but the area just looks like anywhere else, man. Besides the shallow geography of it, you look straight down Times Square, and, it's unmistakably that. I mean, I'm at this point now, I think of Times Square, and I think of that scene from Terra Firma where the actor, I forgot his name, he passed by the way, he's just running down straight through Times Square naked, man. It's completely wild, man. But, yeah, I know you can see a lot of these cities that have just lost personality. They all look the same. They all have the same exteriors. There's just nothing really to it. And that's why it's just so fun to see, especially on a site like this, just seeing these kind of smaller kind of local cinemas, man, what they bring to each town that they appear in, the ma and pa's, kind of cinemas, maybe have a screen or two. And it's just, I just find all that stuff so fascinating. But Variety, I really enjoyed this film, man. Like I said, it's you get your taste of that look at Times Square at that era, but you also get a really solid character study, really great look at a lot of these locations at the time, and long sequences without dialogue. And actually, what I wanted to say is that for any recent kind of documentary fans, if you've been watching any recent documentaries, there was the documentary that came out in 2022, which got nominated for an Academy Award, All the Beauty and the Bloodshed, about, let me pull up her name right here. I apologize, I forget her name. That was Nan Golden. And the documentary goes back and forth between her life in New York City and being involved in this art scene and photography and stuff, up to a contemporary kind of protest where she's going up against the Sackler family, and talks about her personal relationship with people who have passed away because of them and stuff. Anyway, it's a very good documentary. It's on HBO Max right now. But there's a sequence in that they talk about a pub, or I think it was a pub. Yeah, I think it was, that she frequented and that she had been involved with, that they actually filmed some of Variety in, and they actually show a clip from Variety in the documentary. So I recommend both those films, Variety, which I don't, like I said, it has a Kino Blu-ray. I don't know if it's streaming or anything, but All the Beauty and the Bloodshed, which is a very good documentary, which is on HBO Max right now, which is worth your time, especially, like I said, especially if you're a fan of that era. It's just a lot of great portraits, a lot of great photography. I think the flashbacks in that film are much stronger than the contemporary, newer kind of things going on in that film. The Sackler family stuff is interesting, but I don't think it's as interesting as the flashbacks and stuff. Anyways, both those films are worth your time nonetheless. And let me pull this up right here. Let's see here. So speaking of kind of a place and a time. I want to get this up right here. Okay, from 1998. Get this here. I guess technically 1999, because this played at a festival in Canada in 98, but actually was not released until 1999 in the rest of the world, including... Interesting, there's no American release date on here, but I imagine that it probably did. Don't know. Anyways, this is the film LA Without a Map from 99, directed by Mika Kaurismäki. And, this has a very interesting cast behind it. You have some big names behind this. You have the four main characters, man. You have David Tennant, who's been in a bunch of stuff. He was on Doctor Who. He was in the remake of Fright Night. You have my guy, Vincent Gallo, who I just think is one of the great artists of the 20th century, man. And you have Julie Delpy from, the Before series by Richard Linklater, and she's been in plenty of other work. And then you also have the fourth character, Vanessa Shaw, who has been in a handful of films. She was in Eyes Wide Shut, a very memorable role in that. She was in the remake of 3:10 to Yuma. She still does a lot of stuff, but you have four great leads there, man. You have David Tennant. You got this guy who, I think he was coming from, I don't remember, Ireland or Scotland or one of those places. Anyways, he's like, I'm going to Hollywood. I'm going to live my life out there, man. I'm going to have a good time. And he goes out there and it goes about as well as exactly as you'd expect. Things are not going well. Everyone wants to be an actor. Everyone wants to be a writer. Everyone wants to be this big hot shot. But eventually gets involved with Vincent Gallo, who plays a very charismatic, interesting character. He's this guy who just, he's very constantly talking, constantly moving around. He's kind of a ladies' man in a way, if you will. But they develop this very interesting friendship. Meanwhile, they both have lovers on the side, man. I think it was... I'm trying to remember. Because the thing with some of these films, it's been a little while since I've seen these, so I do apologize for maybe if I get some information wrong. But I believe it was Vincent Gallo's character who was involved with Julie Delpy's character, and kind of the they're playing background characters, but they're still interesting. They're still both very charismatic. Vincent Gallo, especially, I've talked about before in the past. Of just sort of, I think he's just such an interesting and charismatic leading man. I've talked about before. Buffalo 66 was my favorite film of 1998, and The Brown Bunny, I think, is just such an underappreciated and interesting film, man. I think it's one of these films that, because of the controversy behind it, and because of Vincent Gallo's personality, and especially his kind of reaction to some of the negative opinions, ultimately it overshadowed the film itself. But I think that, in part to availability of it, I remember there was a local rental store I used to frequent, 10 years ago or so, and they had a copy of the DVD there, and to this day, I just wish I grabbed that copy, man. But actually, interestingly enough, is that Vincent Gallo ended up very briefly selling a very, just a disc only, I think it was disc only, or had a very, just nothing packaging Blu-ray of The Brown Bunny very, very briefly on his website, and I would have liked to have gotten a copy, but one, it was a little pricey. I think it was like $30 some odd, and two, I think it was just the disc, or it wasn't like a traditional Blu-ray case. I mean, you can probably go online and just download your own artwork for that, but I'd love to see a company like Criterion or Arrow just pick up, The Brown Bunny, and pick up Buffalo 66. I mean, Buffalo 66 has a Blu-ray now, but there's not a lot of features on there. I mean, the production of that is pretty kind of well known. Vincent Gallo kind of pretty much clashed with everybody on set on that, and had some very unkind words for some of his co-actors and stuff. But I think that it is a brilliant film. I think that a big part of that film is his performance, in that he plays such a charismatic in a way, but really kind of like a loser in that film, where he's just like lashing out at everybody, and you think like no one would like this guy, but then you watch the film and then he gets to the second half, and really you just see what kind of like guy he is. There's really nothing for him in life, and even this girl who was at first was scared of him really feels kind of sorry for him, feels kind of pity. She's like, this guy's not a threat at all. He wants to be this kind of person that he is not. He's not a hard ass. He's just a guy who is unstable and ultimately looking for something more. And there's just that one moment in the end of the film, man, that I thought was so... There's two sequences at the end of that film I think are so great that just really stuck with me. Is that one when he gets on the phone with Kevin Conley, and just the conversation he has with them. And I'm not going to say any spoilers or anything like that, because it's not even necessarily about the spoilers, but it's more so about, I don't want to talk about anything related to any kind of reveal or anything like that, but the way that he talks about it and the way that he kind of comes to terms with him as a person, as a character. And then that sequence, the very last sequence of the film, when he's in the coffee store, or he's at the coffee place, and he's like kind of interacting with people there, and you just see that he is still this charismatic guy, but he has this such loving personality by the end. It's just so great, man. I mean, it's just one of these films where I can watch it just so many times, and I just love Vincent Gallo as an actor. And I've talked about before the film he did in 2009, Tetro, directed by Francis Ford Coppola, which I think is so criminally underrated, man. I mean, the more I've thought about that film, the more I've liked it. Him and Alden, the actor whose last name I can't remember, I do apologize, but he played, I mean, it was because his biggest would be when he was Han Solo in the Solo Star Wars film. He was also in like Hail Caesar, and he's also a very good actor. He was in that, what was that Warren Beatty film that came out? Came out recently. I'm blanking on the name of. We played Howard Hughes. No Rules Applied, I think it was called, or no, something like that. Anyways, either way, he's a very good actor, and I think that film is so underappreciated. In terms of recent stuff, I have not watched that new version of Twixt yet, which I've been wanting to. I've been wanting to. I haven't even seen Twixt, but apparently he's got Megalopolis. Apparently, is coming out next year. Supposedly, at least. I know that was having some production issues, but I mean, Coppola's work, is kind of pretty much known for some of his production issues, man. But either way, what am I talking about? I'm talking about LA Without a Map. I'm going on this whole tirade I should say, about Vincent Gallo and how much I love him as an actor. But anyways, what I'm saying is that it's also a cameo from one of my favorite filmmakers, Monty Hellman, which I knew he was going to be in the film, and I was like, that was just so cool that of all these, they go for a big Hollywood director, and they go for Monty Hellman, who's he made one of my all-time favorite films, Two Lane Blacktop, but he's also done so much other great work. I grabbed that, I begrudgingly grabbed that Blu-ray of Cockfighter that Scream Factory had put out, the limited edition, and man, if you can find it for cheaper than what I paid for it, then go for it, because that is such a terrific film with Warren Oates and Harry Dean Stanton that I had seen on such a bad copy before, that I think was part of the reason why the first time that I saw it, I was like, man, I just do not like this film because of I think in part because there's a lot of dialogue I was missing. There's a lot of it was just a bad looking print. And that Blu-ray as well, I think, is the same as the Japanese Blu-ray. I remember hearing Brian Sauer talk about it, and he said that he bought I should say Shout Factory, not Screen Factory, whatever, but he bought that copy as well, and I think he said that was the same print, which a lot of those Japanese Blu-rays just do not look good, man. I mean, I'm sorry. I had the Blu-ray of Martin, that was a Japanese Blu-ray, and it looked like a DVD, man. I mean, and I still have that Second Sight 4K sealed on the shelf. I have not even rewatched it yet. I buy all these titles, and I just don't rewatch it. I mean, that's the funny thing as a collector is that, you buy these films that you want to have, but you don't have a real urgency to watch it. Like recently, I did order the Blu-ray of Skidameric because I wanted to listen to the commentary on that. But will I watch it anytime soon? I don't know, man. Probably not. I did say I just saw it a couple months ago. It's still very fresh in my mind. So I thought that I'll probably sit in the shelf for a while, and especially if you're I'm a subscriber to Vinegar Syndrome stuff, and there's some films they put out that I know I don't like that I get anyways, like Beware Children at Play, which is a Troma film that I got last year, and it's still sealed on the shelf. It's probably never gonna be open because I'm just not a fan of that film. It's got one good sequence at the end, but the rest of that film is a snoozer, man. I tell you. Anyways, going back to LA Without a Map, David Tennant as well in the film. He's a very likable, charismatic lead, and I think in part it helps that you're liking the film, it's good and all that, but then I think once Vincent Gallo gets in the film is really where a lot of the film shines, because David Tennant is good on his own, but when he has that back and forth with Vincent Gallo, who is such a charismatic, likable character, he's always, smoking cigarettes, he's always saying, yo, bro, hey, bro. I mean, he says bro more than Mark Borchardt says man, I tell you, it's insanity, but Vincent Gallo, he's very charismatic character. He works for this pool company, and the two of them. Oh, and also I gotta say, which I won't even say what the reveal is, but there's a David Tennant kind of looks at a character from he looks at a poster for a Jim Jarmusch film. and he kind of interacts with that actor and character on the poster, kind of looks for them for advice. And at first, I was like, "Oh, that's kind of cool." They just kind of, the director was just obviously a fan of this film and wanted to show it off. But then that actor actually shows up, and does some movements, and it's like, oh man, that's so cool. They got not only that actor, but that actor from that specific film, man. And I don't want to say what it is, and I don't recommend looking up the film on YouTube because I went to go look up a couple clips, and that actor in that film, him playing that character is shows up a couple times. I think it'll be a more fun reveal, especially if you're a Jim Jarmusch fan. You're like, oh, that's great, that's so cool. Speaking of Jim Jarmusch, man, maybe one of these episodes will talk about Patterson. I really want to talk about that film, man. But I haven't yet. That's such an important film to me that I never talked about in the show. But oh my gosh, man, I do apologize. I'm going off on this total tirade here, man. This is what happens when I don't have notes. I just start talking about absolute nonsense, man. I just start talking about all this other stuff. But I will say though is that Ellie Without a Map is a very, very enjoyable film. It's truly, when I talk about the cozy corner of cinema, man, it really is one of these films that, a cozy film can mean many things to you. It can mean a film that you've seen a bunch of times that you watch when maybe you're feeling down or you're feeling in a good mood and you're just like, I want to watch something very cozy, something that I know that I like. There's plenty of films that I love that I consider cozy films. And this is one that I think is so cozy that when you watch it, just hanging out with these characters in this setting, it's so likable. These characters are so likable and so enjoyable, and even when there are conflicts, it's still just so enjoyable to watch, man. This film is on Amazon Prime, I do have to say. There was a time when it wasn't on Prime, then I went to go watch it. So just heads up on there. But at the time of recording this is on Prime, and I think is very much worth your time. And actually, speaking of Gallo, I meant to say before that I got from the last Vinegar Syndrome partner titles releases, I grabbed Trouble Every Day, which has Vincent Gallo in it, which is a Claire Denis film. But I mean to grab that just for Gallo. I've got, I've only seen a couple of Claire Denis films, and I've got very mixed opinions on her work. But I do think that she is an interesting filmmaker, even if I'm not, the biggest fan of some of her work. But that will definitely be watched soon, especially because of Vincent Gallo. And actually, speaking of Vinegar Syndrome as well, I got the 4K of Freeway 2, which I haven't seen yet. I haven't even seen the first Freeway yet. With I think also Natasha Lyonne's in the second film, who's also one of my favorite actors. I think she's just such an interesting, charismatic personality, and I'll watch anything that she's in, man. I think she's great. It was great seeing her have a cameo in the Knives Out sequel. I know she's friends with Rian Johnson and stuff, but yeah, I think she's just such an interesting, great, charismatic actor, and I love that she went to bat for Out of the Blue when that was getting its re-release. But I talked about that film. Actually, Out of the Blue, I talked about the second or third episode of the show. I talked about that for just a half hour straight and how much I love that film. But anyways, man, I'm rambling on now. Here I am, disorganized, talking about these films. Variety, All the Beauty and the Bloodshed, Ellie Without a Map, Buffalo 66, Brown Bunny. These films are all worth your time, man. Do not succumb to the nonsensical, nauseating, mainstream, just garbage fast food cinema, man. You will not get anything out of it. They will not stick with you. In 5 or 10 or 15 years, you will not be talking about the latest superhero thing. And if that's your thing, if that's your thing, you're like, Dan, you're crazy. In 15 years, I will be talking about this. I say, hey, man, then you are on the path to success, man. Enjoy the art that you want to enjoy. Take it in, whatever it is. Even if you disagree with me, you say, Dan, you're crazy. You don't know what you're talking about. That's your prerogative. That's your right. And I ain't going to try to steer you in the opposite direction, man. Enjoy the art you want to enjoy. Anyways, guys, we still got plenty of daylight left here. There's going to be plenty of reading done today, plenty of writing and screenwriting, and of course, plenty of watching, man. You guys have a fantastic rest of your day. Make sure you're using your time wisely. Do what is exactly what you want to do, and don't waste your own time, man, because we only got this one life, so you might as well take advantage of it while you still got it. All right, man. You guys have a good one. I'm out of here. Until next time.